Have you ever seen something like that before? A whole compound celebrating one man, laughing with him, praising him, while somewhere at the back, the one person who truly knows who he is lying there, slowly dying? It sounds strange, but it happens. Not because she didn't understand what she saw, not because she was confused, and definitely not because she didn't have the courage. No, it was simply because of who she was, a housemaid. And in that kind of setting, people like her don't really have a voice. Let me ask you something. If a woman spends over 30 years in one house, waking up before everyone, sleeping after everyone, seeing everything, hearing everything, does her truth matter less, or is it just easier for people to believe the man sitting comfortably in the big chair? My mother used to say something. When the ego speaks, all the smaller birds go quiet. But what she didn't always add is this. Sometimes it's that small bird that saw what the ego did when nobody else was watching. This story is about Adaize, a housemaid, a quiet woman, the kind of person people stop noticing once she becomes part of the background. She wasn't loud, she didn't argue, she didn't draw attention to herself. She just did her work, kept her head down, and minded her business. But what nobody knew was this. For 31 years, Adaize was carrying something. Not anger, not bitterness, something heavier than that. A secret. And not the kind of secret you just forget and move on from. No, this was the kind that stays with you, follows you from room to room, sits with you at night when everywhere is quiet, the kind that waits. She tried to ignore it, told herself it wasn't her place to talk, convinced herself that staying quiet was the safest thing someone like her could do. So she kept it in, year after year. For 31 years, she said nothing, until the day the doctor came. They didn't tell her everything, but she understood enough. She knew her time was short, and somehow that changed something inside her. The fear she had carried all those years, it didn't disappear, but it stopped feeling as heavy as the thought of dying with that truth still inside her. She stopped eating properly. She barely slept, but her mind became very clear, because now there was only one thing that mattered. There was one person she needed to see before it was too late. She didn't make noise about it. She didn't call a meeting. She simply mentioned a name, quietly, and sent the message through the younger housegirl. When the young man finally came and stood at her door, he almost didn't go in. He hadn't spoken to her in years. If he was being honest, he barely knew her. But then he looked at her, really looked at her, and there was something in her eyes, something that made it impossible to walk away. "Sit down," she said. Her voice was weak, but steady. "What I'm about to tell you, I should have said it a long time ago. And I'm sorry it took me this long." He sat, and in that small room, with the noise of everyday life still going on outside, people talking, generators running, nothing looking out of place, Adaize finally began to speak. Now, listen carefully, because what that woman said next, it didn't just change one person's life. It shook the entire compound. But before we begin, please like and subscribe to this channel. Drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from. In one busy compound just outside Onitsha, there lived a man everybody respected, or at least everybody pretended to. They called him Obi Nuku, the big man. His real name was Chief Obiora Dike, but honestly, nobody used that unless they didn't know him well. Around here, he was just Chief, the man with the loud generator that never went off, the man whose gate was always open because someone was always coming in, greeting him, asking for help, celebrating something, or just hoping his name could open doors for them. And to be fair, he didn't look like a bad man. That's what made it confusing. He had this warm face, easy smile, the kind of laugh that filled the whole compound. During Christmas, he shared rice to everyone. At funerals, he cried louder than the family. People used to say, "That man, his heart is soft." His wife, Uzuamaka, stayed quiet most of the time. Elegant woman, always composed. His sons, doing well, driving fine cars, living good. Everything in that house ran like clockwork. Food always ready, compound always clean, visitors always attended to. And the person holding all of that together was someone nobody really talked about. Adaeze. She came into that house as a young girl. Nothing special, just one small bag and a willingness to work. But over time, she became part of the house in a way people don't notice until it's too late. She was everywhere. Kitchen, cleaning, running errands, taking care of the children when they were still small, fixing problems before they even became problems. And slowly, she disappeared. Not physically, but in that way people disappear when they become too reliable. Nobody praised her, nobody thanked her, but nobody asked her to leave either. So she stayed. Years passed, then decades. Her hair turned grey, her body got weaker, but still she stayed. Because where exactly was she supposed to go? Then, 3 months ago, everything started changing. She stopped eating properly, started losing weight too fast, the kind of weight loss that makes people uncomfortable to look at. A doctor came one afternoon, spoke quietly with the chief inside. Nobody told Adaeze anything. But when the chief stepped out, she saw his face. And she understood. Somehow, she just knew. So that evening, she called the young house girl and gave her a message. Just one name, Tobena. And one sentence. Tell him I need to see him before I go. Now think about that for a second. Out of everybody in that compound, why Tobena? That evening didn't feel normal. You know that kind of quiet that just sits in the air, like something is about to happen. That was how it felt. Tobena came around 8 p.m. He didn't rush inside. He stood at the door for a moment, like he wasn't even sure why he came. Then he finally entered. The room was small, simple. Adaeze was lying there, looking smaller than she used to be. But her eyes, still sharp. You came, she said. I came, he replied. And for a moment, nothing, just silence. Then she said something that shifted everything. I knew your father. That alone was enough to make him sit up, because his father had been dead for 30 years. And as far as everyone knew, it was just a normal death, heart attack, end of story. Or so they thought. I was here that night, Adaeze continued. The night he died, I didn't sleep. Tobena leaned forward slowly. Something inside him already knew this conversation was about to change things. Your father and the chief argued that night. Not small argument, serious one. Your father said he would not sign anything, that the land was his. Then everything went quiet. You see, this is where things start getting uncomfortable. Because sometimes the truth doesn't come loudly. It comes in pieces. By morning, he couldn't stand, she continued. By afternoon, he was gone. Now Tobena didn't speak. He couldn't. Because if this was true, then everything he believed growing up was wrong. And the man responsible, sleeping comfortably in the main house. That night was not ordinary in the compound. Nothing dramatic had happened yet, but somehow you could just tell something had shifted. Like when a wall starts cracking from inside. You won't see it immediately, but you know it's already happening. Tobena didn't go home. He just sat there in his car, parked outside the gate, engine off, no music, nothing. For over an hour, he didn't even realize how much time had passed. The chief's generator kept humming in the background like it always did. That same steady noise everyone in the compound had gotten used to. A security light threw this dull glow across the fence. Inside, life was still going on. Normal, calm, undisturbed. like nothing was about to change. You see, truth is a funny thing. When something has been buried for too long, it stops feeling real. It starts to feel like a story, like something someone made up, something that doesn't even matter anymore. That was where Tobeno's head was at. Does this even matter now? The man is gone, 30 years gone. What exactly will this change? He kept asking himself that. But then his mind went to his mother. The way she packed their things after the burial, quietly, no shouting, no crying, nothing, just silence. The way she held his hand as they left that compound and never once turned back. Back then, he thought she was just being strong. Now he wasn't so sure. Now it felt like maybe she had already given up. That thought didn't sit well with him. So he stepped out of the car and went back inside. Adeze was still awake, almost like she knew he would return. The moment he sat down, she looked at him and said quietly, "There is something else." Tobeno didn't say anything. He just looked at her, waiting. She took a small breath before continuing. "The morning after your father died, before anyone was called, before the house got busy, I saw the chief." She paused. He was coming out of the store at the back. He was holding something, wrapped in cloth. Tobeno frowned slightly, but didn't interrupt. She continued, "I didn't think much of it then. Why would I? But later, when the doctor came, he asked if your father had eaten or taken anything unusual the night before." She opened her eyes and looked straight at him. The chief answered immediately. Nobody else spoke. He just said no, quickly, too quickly. She went quiet for a second, like she was replaying it in her head. "That cloth he was carrying," she added softly. "I never saw it again." The room fell into silence. Not the comfortable kind, the heavy kind. The kind that makes you aware of every small sound. "Did you tell anyone?" Tobena finally asked. Adeze gave a faint, tired smile. "Who would I tell?" she said. "I was just the housemaid, and he was the chief." That answer landed harder than expected. Tobena sat there for a while, letting everything sink in. Then he asked the question that had been bothering him since the night before. "The land, the one my father refused to sign, what happened to it?" Adeze looked at him carefully before answering. "It's this land," she said. He blinked. "This compound, and the one behind it. The shops you see there now, the ones bringing rent every month." Something shifted inside Tobena at that moment. Not confusion, not even shock. Something heavier. Something that settled deep in his chest. He stood up slowly. He said, "Thank you." She nodded faintly. "Go and rest," he added. Then he walked out. But this time, as he got back to his car, he wasn't sitting in silence anymore. His mind was racing. Names, faces, moments. He started thinking, who else was around back then? Who else might have seen something? Who kept quiet? And more importantly, why? Because one thing was clear now. Adeze couldn't have been the only one who noticed. And somewhere inside the main house, Chief Obiora was sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that after 30 years of silence, something had finally started to break. And this time, it wasn't going to stay buried. 3 days later, everything came together. Not because anyone planned a meeting. It just happened. One phone call led to another. Tobena called his mother called her sister. The sister reached out to someone who knew a lawyer. You know how it is in Nigerian families. News doesn't spread loudly at first. It moves quietly, then suddenly, everybody knows. By Friday evening, about 12 people were seated in the main parlor. Tobena was there, his mother Ngozi, two of his uncles, the lawyer holding one old leather file like that file alone carried weight, and then the chief, sitting in his usual chair, calm, composed, almost like someone who felt this whole thing was beneath him. His son stood by the door, watching. "I don't understand why I was called here," the chief said, adjusting himself slightly. "If there is an issue, there is a proper way to handle it." "There is," Tobena replied. "That's why we are here." Ngozi didn't look up. Since she sat down, her eyes stayed fixed on her hands. You could almost feel it. 30 years of silence sitting on her shoulders. The lawyer cleared his throat and began. He explained everything. Adeze's story, the land, the small inconsistencies, even the second medical opinion Tobena had quietly arranged. Nothing was dramatic, nothing was exaggerated, but it was enough. When he finished, the room went still. The chief didn't react immediately. He just nodded slowly, like a man carefully choosing how to respond. Then he spoke. "So, this is what all of this is about," he said calmly. "A dying woman's memory?" He let out a small breath. "The confused words of someone who is not well?" Tobena didn't raise his voice. "She is unwell, but she is not confused." The chief gave a faint smile. "She imagined things." Tobena shook his head slightly. "No, she remembered. There's a difference." Silence. The kind that stretches. Then, suddenly, the door opened. Everyone turned. It was Chisom, the young girl who walked in the house. She had served drinks earlier and left quietly. Nobody expected her back. But there she was, standing at the door, hands clasped together. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't mean to interrupt, but I need to say something." The chief's eyes landed on her immediately. Sharp. "Chisom," he said, his voice tightening just a little. "This is not your concern." Before he could say more, "Let her talk," one of the uncles said. Firm. No argument. Chisom stepped forward slowly. You could tell she was nervous, but she didn't stop. She looked at Tobena. "Adeeze told me something," she said. Her voice was quiet but steady. "She told me 2 weeks ago, when I used to sit with her in the evenings. She said if anything happens to her before she speaks, I should give this to you." The room shifted instantly. "What?" Tobena asked. "Give me what?" Chisom reached into her apron, pulled out something small, wrapped in cloth, and placed it gently on the table. "A notebook. She has been writing," she said, "for years. Things she saw, things she heard, dates, everything." She swallowed. She said she started writing it down because she was afraid that one day she might forget or never get the courage to speak. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Every eye in that room went from the notebook to the chief. And for the first time, that familiar, easy face of his didn't look so easy anymore. It didn't look calm. It didn't look confident. It just froze. The notebook hadn't even been opened yet, but somehow, everybody in that room already knew nothing was going to remain the same after that moment. The lawyer picked up the notebook slowly, carefully, like it mattered, like it carried something heavy. The room went quiet. Even breathing felt louder. He opened it. The handwriting was small, neat, careful. Not perfect, but intentional. The kind of writing you'd expect from someone who taught herself step by step. Each entry dated, each one deliberate. He read silently at first, then he looked up and started reading out loud. What Daisy wrote wasn't noise, it wasn't guesses, it was details, conversations she overheard, things she saw at night, people who came and left quietly. There was even mention of a man she didn't fully know. She just called him the one with the red cap. He came more than once, always through the back, always leaving the same way. Then came the entry about that morning, the morning Emeka died, the time she woke up, what she heard, what she saw, the cloth, the look on the chief's face, everything. And then the last entry, written shakily, recent. It mentioned the land, the exact plot, the year everything changed, and one final line. I don't know if this will be enough, but it is everything I saw, and it is the truth. Ngozi covered her mouth quietly. One of the uncles stood up and walked to the window. He didn't say anything, just stood there, facing outside. Then the chief spoke, but this time his voice was different, lower, less certain. These are just writings from a sick woman. You cannot take this anywhere and expect. We already have, the lawyer said, soft but firm. He opened his file. We submitted a request 3 days ago. The land transfer, the documents, something doesn't add up. He paused. The witness signature on that document belongs to a man who died 2 years before it was signed. Silence. Deep silence. Tobena spoke, slowly. A dead man signed a document? Nobody answered, especially not the chief. And that silence, that was the loudest thing in the room, because for the first time in 30 years, he had nothing to say. Ngozi finally looked up, straight at him. I knew, she said quietly. Her voice didn't shake. I knew something wasn't right that morning. She paused. But I had children. No support. Nowhere to go. So I told myself I was imagining things. I looked at him fully now. I wasn't. Nobody spoke after that, because there was nothing left to say. That same night, things started moving properly. The case, the land, the records, everything would be reviewed step by step. The chief wasn't taken away that night. Things like this don't happen that fast. But something else happened instead. Something stronger. Everybody knew. By the next morning, the entire compound had heard. The story people believed for 30 years had changed. And once a story changes like that, it doesn't go back. That night, Chisom went back to Adaeze. She sat beside her quietly. Adaeze opened her eyes slightly. Did they hear? She asked. Chisom nodded. They heard. Adaeze closed her eyes again. Not because everything was fixed, but because the truth was finally out. And for her, that was enough. You know what the elders say? A secret is like termites inside a wall. You won't see anything at first, but one day, everything just collapses. The chief built his life thinking everything was buried. He forgot something important. Nothing stays buried forever, especially when someone has been watching all along. Adaeze watched for 31 years, and in the end, one quiet voice was enough. Now, let me ask you, if you were Tobena that night, would you have gone back inside, or would you have driven away and left everything as it was? Think about it. I really want to hear your answer. To everyone who watches these stories on Bola's Folktales, thank you. Truly. You are not just viewers. You are the reason these stories keep being told. The names may be different, the compounds may be different, but the lessons inside them, those belong to all of us. If this story moved something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you are new here, you are welcome. Subscribe to Bola's Folktales so you never miss the next story. Because we are not finished yet. There are many more truths waiting to be told.